The day the alien soldier, Lieutenant Xylor, stepped onto Earth, he thought it would be like any other mission. Xylor came from the Varanar Empire, an advanced alien race known for its powerful weapons, advanced technology, and highly skilled military forces. His mission: to visit the human military academy on Earth and evaluate their training methods. His superiors believed that humans, despite their rapid technological growth, were still weak and unorganized when it came to combat. Xylor was sure this would be a simple task. The Varanar Empire had crushed countless civilizations, and he saw no reason why Earth would be any different. As Xylor's ship descended through the Earth's atmosphere, he couldn't help but look out at the blue planet below. To his eyes, it seemed primitive, full of raw, untapped potential, but nothing that could pose a threat. The Academy, located on a sprawling military base surrounded by dense forests and large training fields, seemed nothing special from above. Xylor's ship landed smoothly on the runway, and his feet touched the Earth's soil for the first time. He could smell the fresh air, but his mind was focused on the task ahead. A human general, Peterson, met him on the tarmac, his uniform pressed, and his face as serious as any soldier's. Peterson was calm and confident, not fazed by Xylor's towering form or the sleek armor that covered his alien body. They exchanged pleasantries, but Xylor's mind was elsewhere. He was eager to see the humans' so-called training firsthand, but he was certain they'd disappoint him. "Welcome to Earth, Lieutenant Xylor," General Peterson said, his voice strong but not unkind. "I hope you find what you're looking for at our academy." Xylor nodded, his gaze sweeping over the academy grounds. As they walked toward the main building, Peterson explained how the academy worked. It trained soldiers from all over the Earth, preparing them for both traditional and advanced warfare. The humans, Peterson said, had their own way of doing things. They weren't reliant on the most advanced technology like the Varanar, but they had something that made them dangerous: their willpower, their creativity, and their ability to adapt in ways that no machine could replicate. Xylor scoffed inwardly. Adaptability. He was here to see how well humans could hold up under pressure, not how many tricks they could think of. He was certain that when it came to real combat, his people's superior technology would crush the humans without breaking a sweat. The academy was about to show him just how far off his assumptions were. The first part of the tour involved a glimpse into the basic training regimen. Xylor watched, unimpressed, as a group of young human soldiers ran through an obstacle course designed to test their physical endurance. They climbed walls, crawled through mud, and sprinted over uneven terrain. Xylor could see the sweat on their faces and hear their breathing grow heavy, but he also saw something else: determination. They didn't stop. They didn't break. Even as they struggled, they pushed on. Why don't they just use their technology to make things easier? Xylor muttered under his breath, wondering why the humans were putting themselves through this. Peterson glanced at him. "Humans believe in strength through struggle, Lieutenant. We push ourselves to the limits because that's how we grow." Xylor wasn't convinced. He thought it was inefficient, unnecessary. Why work so hard when you could just use technology to do it for you? Yet, as he watched the humans continue, he noticed something strange. They didn't seem to care about the struggle. It was as if the pain and the exhaustion were merely obstacles to be overcome. They had a kind of resilience that Xylor hadn't expected. The next stop was a large training field where soldiers participated in war simulations. These were not your typical drills. The humans used holographic technology to create realistic battle scenarios, simulations of alien invasions, natural disasters, or full-scale warfare. Xylor watched as the soldiers faced off against eye-controlled enemies, each more dangerous than the last. At first, Xylor didn't pay much attention. After all, it was just a simulation, right? But soon, he began to realize something troubling. The humans didn't just rely on their training or their tech. They relied on strategy. The soldiers split into teams, using the terrain to their advantage, setting up traps, and working together in ways that seemed almost unnatural for soldiers who weren't equipped with advanced alien tech. Xyler's confidence began to waver as he watched the humans perform. These soldiers were clever, quick, and coordinated. They didn't need the best technology to win. They used what they had with creative brilliance. As the simulation continued, Xyler noticed one soldier in particular, a young corporal named Harper, who stood out from the rest. While others were focused on brute force, Harper moved with precision. He communicated silently with his team, directing them with a calm, controlled voice. There was something about Harper's movements that was different. He wasn't just fighting to win. He was thinking ahead, planning his next move before the enemy even knew what was happening. Xyler narrowed his eyes, intrigued. He had seen many battles before, but this was different. The humans weren't just fighting. They were using their minds to outsmart their opponents. Xyler's own people relied on raw power and superior tech, but the humans, they relied on cunning and resourcefulness. Xyler's pride began to chip away as he realized that these humans, despite their seemingly primitive tools, were more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. His confidence had started to falter, and he couldn't shake the unsettling feeling in his gut. As the tour continued, the suspicion began to creep into his mind. He had come here expecting to witness weakness, but now he wasn't so sure. He'd seen the humans' will to survive and adapt, and that made them far more formidable than any alien technology he had ever faced. Maybe he had been wrong all along, but there was only one way to find out for sure. He would have to see how they performed in an actual combat scenario. The next day, Xyler was led to the heart of the Human Military Academy, where he would witness the true test of human strength. General Peterson had promised him that he would experience firsthand the training that shaped the soldiers of Earth. Xyler's pride was still bruised from the previous day's events, but he was determined to prove that the Verinar Empire was far superior to these primitive humans. The test of endurance, as it was called, was the Academy's most intense and grueling exercise. It was designed to push soldiers to their physical and mental limits. Xyler stood at the edge of the training field, watching as the human recruits prepared for the challenge. The scene was almost like a war zone, with obstacle courses, mock battlefields, and various combat stations scattered across the entire area. The air was thick with tension, as everyone knew this would be no ordinary drill. Xyler's eyes scanned the soldiers as they lined up, each one looking ready to face the most demanding test of their careers. There was no fancy equipment, no energy shields, no advanced cloaking devices, just humans in basic armor, preparing to face the elements, the terrain, and each other. For a moment, Xyler found himself doubting his earlier judgment. These humans had trained to survive in the harshest conditions, and their determination seemed unbreakable. General Peterson stood beside him, waiting for the exercise to begin. "This is where you'll see what they're truly capable of," the general said. Xyler remained silent, watching intently as the soldiers moved into their starting positions. The exercise began, and immediately the atmosphere shifted. The first phase was a race across a rugged terrain filled with obstacles designed to simulate real-world conditions. Soldiers had to climb walls, crawl under nets, swim through mud-filled trenches, and navigate through dense forest areas. It was a test of speed, agility, and sheer strength. Xyler was unimpressed at first. He expected the soldiers to fall apart, especially as the harsh conditions of the course took their toll. But instead of slowing down, the humans seemed to dig deeper, pushing themselves harder with every step. They struggled, yes, but they didn't quit. The pain and exhaustion were visible on their faces, but their will to keep going seemed even stronger. Xyler could see that this was not about being the fastest or the strongest. It was about enduring the impossible, and in that moment, he started to realize something that shook him to the core. Humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to survive. Their endurance wasn't just physical. It was a mental strength that Xyler hadn't anticipated. As the soldiers approached the most difficult part of the obstacle course, a deep trench filled with fast-moving water, Xyler was sure that many of them would fail. The water was freezing cold, and the current was strong. To make matters worse, the trench was filled with sharp rocks, making the challenge even more dangerous. But Xyler watched in amazement as the soldiers navigated the trench with a mix of speed and caution. They helped each other, pulling each other across when one soldier struggled. There was no hesitation, no fear, just a relentless drive to finish the task. Xyler's eyes narrowed as he followed the soldiers. Corporal Harper, the soldier who had caught his attention the day before, was leading the way. Harper's movements were fluid and calculated, like a seasoned warrior. He moved through the course as if it were second nature, his body adapting to every obstacle, every challenge. But what amazed Xyler the most was Harper's ability to stay calm under pressure. He didn't panic when things got tough. He simply adjusted and kept going, dragging his fellow soldiers along with him. When the last of the recruits crossed the finish line, Xyler stood in stunned silence. The soldiers were covered in mud, their clothes torn, their faces weary, but not one of them had given up. They had endured the worst that the academy could throw at them, and they had done so with a sense of unity that Xyler couldn't help but respect. It was more than just physical endurance. It was a teamwork that made them stronger than any individual soldier. The next phase of the exercise was a combat simulation, but this time, the stakes were higher. The recruits were pitted against a series of AI-controlled enemies, each one designed to mimic the most dangerous opponents humanity might face in real battle. The recruits had no idea what they were about to face, but they had been trained for this moment. Xyler stood on the sidelines, arms crossed, watching the recruits as they faced off against the AI enemies. The first wave of enemies consisted of mechs, robotic soldiers with advanced weaponry. The recruits immediately split into teams, using the terrain to their advantage. They set up ambushes, using everything from rocks to fallen branches as weapons to outmaneuver the mechs. Xyler observed the soldiers' every move. They didn't panic, even when the mechs opened fire. They adjusted their tactics on the fly, using the environment to their advantage. Xyler's eyes widened as he realized that the humans were not just fighting. They were outsmarting the AI. They used their knowledge of the terrain, their adaptability, and their creativity to make up for their lack of advanced technology. Xyler had expected to see them fail, but instead, he saw soldiers who were quick thinkers, able to turn the tide of battle with nothing but their wits and courage. As the battle raged on, Xyler couldn't help but feel a growing sense of respect for the human soldiers. They weren't the most powerful beings in the galaxy, but they had something far more dangerous, a fire within them that refused to be extinguished. Even when the simulation grew more intense and the odds stacked against them, the humans fought harder, not just for victory, but for each other. By the end of the simulation, Xyler found himself in awe. The recruits had faced overwhelming odds, and yet they had won. They hadn't just relied on technology or brute strength. They had used strategy, teamwork, and resolve. Xyler realized that these humans were not to be underestimated. They had a strength that went beyond their bodies and their weapons. It was something far more powerful, their spirit. As Xyler stood in silence, watching the humans congratulate each other and celebrate their hard-earned victory, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had misjudged them. These humans were no longer the weak, unworthy species he had thought them to be. They were something far more dangerous, a force to be reckoned with. The real challenge was just beginning. The sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the training grounds as Xyler stood on the edge of the combat arena, still processing the events of the past few days. His mind was racing, conflicted by what he had witnessed. The humans had proven themselves more capable than he had ever anticipated. Their endurance, their teamwork, and their resolve had shaken his belief that they were nothing more than a primitive species. Now, they were about to face something much more dangerous, an encounter with real enemy forces. "They'll come in full force," Xyler said, his voice low, but filled with certainty. "The Varinar won't hesitate. They'll use everything at their disposal to crush you." "I know," General Peterson replied. But we have something they don't. Us. And these soldiers. These humans. We might be small, but we're not weak. You've seen that. You know what we're capable of. And we're going to fight with everything we've got. Xylor could sense the determination in the general's voice. There was no fear, no doubt. Peterson believed in the humans, and for the first time, Xylor found himself questioning the superiority of his own species. The Verinar were ruthless, yes, but the humans were different. They had something that made them resilient, something that couldn't be measured in technology or firepower. It was their spirit, their will to survive at all costs. Over the next few days, the Academy ramped up its preparations. Every soldier, every recruit, was given the mission of their lives: to defend Earth against an enemy that would stop at nothing to destroy them. Xylor watched the humans as they trained harder than ever before, their faces set with determination. They were no longer just training for drills or simulations. This was real. As the humans prepared, Xylor found himself spending more time with the soldiers, particularly Corporal Harper. Harper had become a symbol of hope, a leader among the recruits. Xylor had been observing him for days, trying to understand what made him different. There was something about Harper, a quiet confidence, a fierce loyalty to his comrades, that set him apart from the others. He was the embodiment of the human spirit, and Xylor began to feel an odd respect for him. One evening, as the soldiers were finishing up their training exercises, Harper approached Xylor. "You've been watching us for days now," Harper said, his tone more curious than confrontational. "What do you think? You've seen what we're capable of. Are we ready?" Xylor paused for a moment, his mind racing. He had never expected to find himself in a position where he was not only witnessing the strength of the humans, but questioning his own beliefs. The Verinar were advanced in ways the humans could never match, and yet Xylor couldn't help but feel something stirring within him. "I've never seen anything like it," Xylor admitted. "You're soldiers. You're more than just fighters. You're survivors. And maybe that's what will make the difference when the Verinar arrive." Harper gave him a small smile, though his eyes remained serious. "We don't have much time, do we?" "No," Xylor replied. "Not much at all." The tension in the air was palpable. The turning point had come. The humans had no choice but to prepare for war, and Xylor had to admit something that had been growing in his heart since the moment he arrived on Earth. He wanted to be part of it. He wanted to see humanity stand against the Verinar and show the galaxy that there was more to victory than superior technology and firepower. It was about heart, about fighting when the odds were stacked against you, about never giving up, no matter what. But the question still lingered. Would the humans be enough to stop the Verinar? Would their spirit, their will to fight, be enough to hold back the relentless force of the Verinar Empire? As Xylor stood there, watching the humans train, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the upcoming battle. The real fight was about to begin, and for the first time in a long while, he was uncertain of the outcome. One thing was clear, though: the humans would not go down without a fight. And no matter what happened, Xylor knew he would stand by their side. The turning point had arrived, and it was up to the humans to prove that they were more than just survivors. They were warriors. The air felt different now. There was an unease, a tension that settled over the human military academy. The days had passed in a blur of training exercises and strategic briefings, but now something had shifted. The war with the Verinar was no longer just a possibility, it was a certainty, and with this certainty came the heavy burden of what was to come. Xylor, having observed the humans closely, could see that they were ready. But even as they prepared, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play, something that no one had anticipated. He had been trained for years to anticipate his enemies' moves, to predict their every action. But when it came to the humans, Xylor had started to realize that he couldn't predict them at all. Their courage was boundless, their will indomitable. But it was more than that. There was a fierce loyalty that ran deep among them, a loyalty that made them stronger than he had ever imagined. The humans had something the Verinar could never understand, an unbreakable spirit. Xylor had seen the humans rallying together, pushing themselves harder with each passing day. They knew the battle ahead would not be easy, but they were not backing down. Their strength came not from the size of their weapons or the power of their technology, but from the strength of their unity, their determination, and their belief that they could win against all odds. Xylor found himself becoming more and more impressed with their resilience. He had once looked at them as weak, insignificant creatures, but now he saw them for what they truly were, warriors in their own right. However, it was during the quiet hours of the night, when the academy was still and silent, that Xylor found himself deep in thought. He had learned a lot about the humans, but there was one thing he hadn't yet understood. Why had they chosen to fight? Why had they chosen to stand against the Verinar, when they knew the odds were stacked so heavily against them? The Verinar were an empire unlike any other, their fleet vast and their technology far beyond what humans could hope to match. And yet, here they were, preparing for war. As the sun rose on the day of the final confrontation, Xylor stood in the Academy's war room, his mind racing. The humans were ready, no doubt about that. They had trained hard, pushed themselves beyond their limits, and were now on the verge of battle. But Xylor could still see the uncertainty in their eyes. It wasn't fear, no. It was something else. Something deeper. He turned to face General Peterson, who stood at the front of the room, giving one final briefing to the assembled soldiers. "This is it," Peterson said, his voice steady but laced with the weight of the situation. "Today, we face the Verinar. We may not have the technology or the numbers, but we have something more powerful, our will. We fight for our home. We fight for each other. And we fight for the future. No matter what happens, we will not give up." Xylor felt a strange stirring inside him. It wasn't just the general's words that moved him. It was the determination that radiated from every single human soldier in the room. Each one of them was ready to give everything for this fight. They were not going into battle with the hope of survival, but with the certainty that they had to win. For their families, for their planet, for each other. But as the briefing ended and the soldiers began to prepare for their deployment, Xylor found himself stepping away from the group. His mind was still racing, trying to put together the pieces of what he had learned. There was something about this battle that felt different, something about the humans' resolve that made him question his own beliefs. They had no fear, no doubt. And yet, despite their courage, Xylor couldn't shake the feeling that the battle ahead wasn't just a test of their strength. It was a test of something deeper. As he walked out of the war room and into the courtyard, Xylor was approached by Corporal Harper, the same soldier he had observed for days. Harper had become a leader among the troops, a symbol of what the humans stood for. But now, as Xylor looked into Harper's eyes, he saw something that unsettled him. "You're not sure we can win, are you?" Harper asked, his voice soft but piercing. Xylor looked at him in silence for a moment, unsure of how to answer. It wasn't that he didn't believe in the humans, it was more complicated than that. He had never seen a species fight with such heart, such passion. But the Verinar were coming, and there was no denying the scale of their power. "I don't know," Xylor admitted, "but you've shown me something I didn't expect. You've shown me that maybe there's more to this fight than just firepower and strategy." Harper gave him a knowing look. "It's not just about firepower, Xylor. It's about what we stand for. We fight because we have to. And that makes all the difference. We don't fight because we think we can win. We fight because we believe we can win." Xylor nodded slowly. The words echoed in his mind long after Harper had walked away. The humans weren't fighting because they thought they could win. They were fighting because they believed they could. It was the belief that made them powerful. It was the faith in themselves and each other that made them impossible to defeat. As the battle drew closer, Xylor realized that the humans had already won in a way. They had already conquered the most powerful force in the universe, their own doubt. The final revelation was this: The humans didn't need to match the Verinar in technology or strength. They only needed their spirit, their determination to see them through. And in that moment, Xylor understood something profound. Victory didn't lie in superior weapons or tactics. It lay in the heart of the soldiers. And the humans had the strongest hearts he had ever seen. The final revelation was clear now. No matter the outcome of the battle, the humans had already proven themselves to be a force to be reckoned with. The battle had come and gone, leaving destruction in its wake. The Verinar fleet had arrived with their towering ships, their cold, calculating strategies ready to crush humanity once and for all. But what the Verinar had not anticipated was the unbreakable spirit of the humans. They fought not just with weapons, but with heart, with resolve. And in the end, it was that human spirit that won the day. Xylor stood at the edge of the battlefield, looking out over the wreckage. The once vast expanse of the military academy was now littered with burning debris, shattered structures, and fallen soldiers. Some of the Verinar ships had been destroyed, but so had many of the human forces. The cost had been high, but they had won. Xylor's chest tightened with an emotion he had never experienced before: respect. The humans had fought against impossible odds and triumphed. He had seen it with his own eyes, and he could no longer deny the strength they possessed. He had been prepared to leave the planet, to return to his own people, but now something held him back. He wasn't sure what it was: a lingering curiosity, or perhaps a newfound admiration for the humans who had shown him what true courage was. His mission had been clear: observe and report back. But now, everything felt different. He couldn't just leave without understanding what had happened here, without understanding why he felt this strange connection to these humans who had proven themselves more powerful than anything he had known. Xylor made his way through the camp, past the wounded and the dead, toward the place where the remaining human soldiers were gathering. General Peterson stood with his officers, discussing the aftermath of the battle. The general's face was grim, but his eyes held something else: pride. It was a strange thing to see in the aftermath of such a devastating fight, but it was there, undeniable. These soldiers had been through hell, and yet they had come out the other side victorious. When Xylor approached, Peterson gave him a nod of acknowledgement. "You made it through the battle, Xylor. I wasn't sure you'd survive, but you did. You've seen firsthand what humans are capable of." Xylor didn't answer right away. He had seen it, and it had shaken him to his core. "I've seen your strength," he finally said. "But there's something else I don't understand. Why do you fight so hard? You've lost so much. What drives you to keep going?" Peterson paused, his eyes softening. "We fight for the ones we loved, Xylor. We fight for each other. We fight because it's the only thing we can do. When there's nothing left to lose, you fight with everything you have. And that's how we win." Xylor had never fully understood that. His people, the Verinar, fought for power, for control. They believed in the strength of their technology and their numbers. But this was different. The humans fought because they believed in something deeper, something more meaningful than power or victory. They fought for love, for family, for community. Xylor stood in silence, reflecting on what he had just heard. It was a perspective that was foreign to him, something he couldn't have imagined before this war. And yet, here he was, staring at the aftermath, realizing that he had been wrong about the humans. They were not weak. They were stronger than he could ever have imagined. But as the days passed and the remaining soldiers began to regroup, a sense of unease began to settle in. Xylor couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something worse than the battle they had just fought. He could sense it in the air, the way the humans moved with a mixture of pride and fear. They had won, yes, but there was still a threat lingering. The Verinar might have been defeated, but the larger conflict was far from over. It was then that Xylor's worst fears were confirmed. A new fleet of Verinar ships had been spotted on the outer edges of the system. They were coming, and they were coming in full force. The humans had no idea what was waiting for them. They had fought bravely, But this new wave would be different. This time, there would be no second chances. This was it. Xylor knew he had to make a decision. He had seen enough to know that the humans were not going to survive if they faced this new wave of Varanara alone. The strength they had shown in the previous battle had been incredible, but it had also been costly. They had lost many, and they had nothing left to give. They needed help, and for the first time in his life, Xylor realized he could be the one to give it. He approached General Peterson again, his mind racing. "General," he said, his voice low, "there's something you need to know. The Varanar, they're coming. But not just in small numbers. They're coming with everything they have. This fight won't be like the last one. You need to prepare. You need to." Peterson raised a hand, cutting him off. "We know, Xylor. We know. But we've been through this before, and we will fight. We will fight for our home, for our people, and we will win." Xylor felt a surge of respect for the human general, but he couldn't help but wonder if they had enough. They had won against the Varanar before, but they couldn't keep winning forever. The odds were too great, and the consequences of losing now. Xylor didn't want to think about it. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but one thing was clear. Leaving wasn't an option anymore. He had to stay. He had to help. As the sun set over the battlefield, Xylor turned to look at the horizon. The sky was a deep orange, a stark contrast to the smoke rising from the wreckage of the destroyed ships. He felt a strange heaviness settle in his chest. The war was far from over, and the true battle had yet to begin. And in that moment, as he stood among the humans who had shown him what true courage was, Xylor realized that he was no longer an observer. He was a part of this fight now, and he would do whatever it took to help them win.